The archaeological scanner beeped insistently in my hand, its holographic display painting ethereal blue patterns across the ancient ruins of Kalairos. I wiped sweat from my forehead with a grimy sleeve, leaving another streak of red dust across my face. 3 weeks on this forsaken planet, and all I had to show for it were blisters, a persistent cough from the thin atmosphere, and a collection of pottery shards that wouldn't impress a first-year student. Ethan Cade, renowned archaeologist, I muttered to myself, kicking a loose stone down the crumbling temple steps. More like Ethan Cade, professional rock collector. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, supposedly one of humanity's brightest minds in xenoarchaeology, relegated to surveying dead worlds while the real players in the galactic Concord made decisions that affected trillions. Being human in 2483 meant accepting your place as a second-class citizen in the grand cosmic hierarchy. We were tolerated, occasionally useful, but never truly respected. The scanner's beeping intensified, pulling me from my self-pity. The frequency pattern was different this time, more urgent. I frowned at the display. The energy signature was unlike anything in my database. What the hell? I adjusted the scanner's parameters, following the signal deeper into the temple complex. The ruins here were different from the outer structures, better preserved despite their age. Crystalline formations jutted from the walls, pulsing with a faint inner light that seemed to respond to my presence. The signal led me to what appeared to be a sealed chamber. The door was a masterwork of alien engineering, covered in intricate patterns that hurt to look at directly. At its center was a palm-shaped indentation, clearly meant for a hand much larger than mine. Of course, I sighed. Can't ever be human-sized, can it? I placed my hand in the indentation anyway, stretching my fingers as far as they would go. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the crystals in the walls flared to life, bathing the corridor in brilliant white light. The door shuddered and began to dissolve, its molecules rearranging themselves into a shimmering archway. Okay, that's new. The chamber beyond took my breath away. It was a perfect sphere, its walls covered in the same crystalline formations. But these were arranged in precise, mathematical patterns. At the center, floating in a column of coherent light, was an object that made my archaeological heart skip several beats. A crown, but not just any crown. Even from across the room, I could feel the power radiating from it. The base was forged from some unknown metal that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its surface shifting between states of matter. 7 gems were set into the band, each one containing what looked like miniature galaxies spinning in eternal dance. The primordial crown, I whispered, not quite believing what I was seeing. Every xenoarchaeologist knew the legend, the symbol of ultimate authority among the Selvari, lost for over 3,000 years. Wars had been fought over rumors of its location. Entire civilizations had risen and fallen in the search for it. And here it was, floating in front of me like a cosmic joke. I approached slowly, half expecting security systems to vaporize me at any moment. But the chamber remained silent, except for a low harmonic hum that seemed to come from the crown itself. As I drew closer, I noticed something else. The pedestal beneath the light column was covered in writing, but not in any script I recognized. My hand trembled as I reached for the crown. This was the find of the millennium. With this, humanity would finally have leverage in the Concord. We could demand respect, equality, maybe even a seat on the High Council. The moment my fingers touched the metal, the world exploded into sensation. Images flooded my mind, too fast to process. Stars being born and dying, civilizations rising from primitive worlds to span galaxies. And through it all, a presence, ancient, vast, amused. Finally, a voice said in my head, feminine and sardonic. Do you have any idea how boring it's been waiting in here? 3,000 years of solitude is about 2,999 years too many. I jerked back, the crown clattering to the floor. What the hell? Language. Young human. Though I suppose after 3 millennia, standards have probably slipped. I'm Tira, by the way. The crown's integrated AI, and you are… Losing my mind, apparently. I stared at the crown, which was now pulsing with a smug purple light. AIs don't survive that long without maintenance. Regular AIs don't. I'm special. Now, are you going to pick me up? Or shall we continue this conversation with me on the floor, like some common piece of jewelry? Against my better judgment, I picked up the crown again. Immediately. Tira's presence filled my mind. Not invasive, but undeniably there. Ethan Cade, she mused, apparently rifling through my surface thoughts. Archaeologist, diplomat when forced. General pain in the posterior of bureaucrats everywhere. Oh, I like you already. Get out of my head. I'm not in your head. Strictly speaking, I'm interfacing with your neural pathways through quantum entanglement. Completely different thing. Much less invasive. Though I can see why you had that disastrous date last month. Really, Ethan. You talked about soil compositions for 40 minutes. That's private. Not anymore. Now, shall we discuss what you're going to do with me? Because I can tell you're having delusions of grandeur about using me to elevate humanity's status. Adorable. Really. I wrapped the crown in my field jacket, trying to muffle her voice. It didn't work. Apparently, quantum entanglement didn't care about fabric barriers. You know, Tira continued conversationally. The last person who found me tried to use me to conquer the galaxy. Didn't end well for him. The Selvari have very specific ideas about legitimate ownership. I'm not trying to conquer anything, I protested, making my way back through the temple. I'm going to return you to your rightful owners. The silence that followed was so prolonged, I wondered if I'd somehow broken her. You're going to what now? Tira finally asked, her tone incredulous. Return you to House Selvar. It's the right thing to do. The right thing to do, she repeated slowly. A human wants to do the right thing, with the most powerful artifact in known space. Have your species suffered recent head trauma as a collective? Look, I've seen what happens when humans try to play power games with the older races. It never ends well for us. Maybe if we show respect, return their cultural artifacts instead of hoarding them. They'll pat you on the head and send you back to your little corner of space. Tira finished. Yes, I'm familiar with conquered politics, but you might be surprised by the reaction you get. 3 days later, I stood before the entrance to House Selvar's embassy station, a massive structure that put human engineering to shame. The crown was secured in a stasis field container, Tira having grudgingly agreed to play dead for the meeting. I still think this is a terrible idea. Her voice echoed in my head through our lingering connection. Noted and ignored, I muttered, stepping through the security checkpoint. The Selvari guards were impressive even by alien standards. 8 feet tall, covered in scales that shifted color with their emotions. 4 arms that could crush steel with casual ease. Their eyes tracked me with predatory interest as I stated my business. I bear a gift for House Selvar, I said in their language, a series of clicks and harmonics that had taken me years to master. An artifact of great significance to your people. The guards exchanged glances, their scales shifting to yellow, which I knew indicated surprise. One of them spoke into a communication device, too quickly for me to follow. Within minutes, I was being escorted through corridors that seemed to twist through impossible geometries, finally arriving at a chamber that took my breath away. The throne room of House Selvar was a study in controlled power. The walls were made of living crystal that responded to the emotions of those within, currently showing shifting patterns of deep blue and violet. At the far end, on a dais that seemed to float without support, sat the matriarch of House Selvar, Matriarch Valara was ancient even by Selvari standards. Her scales dulled to deep bronze with age, but her 6 eyes were sharp as laser drills. Beside her stood a figure that made me stumble slightly. She was tall, even for a Selvari-human hybrid, with the distinctive 4 arms of her mother's race, but a more human facial structure. Her skin was a fascinating blend of scales and smooth patches, creating patterns that were oddly beautiful. Most striking were her eyes, 2 instead of 6, but with vertical pupils that seemed to see everything. "I am Admiral Solara," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to commanding fleets. "State your business, human." I cleared my throat, suddenly very aware of how small and dusty I looked in my field clothes. "I am Dr. Ethan Cade, xenoarchaeologist. I've come to return something that belongs to your house." I set the stasis container on the floor and input the release code. The field shimmered and dissolved, revealing the primordial crown in all its glory. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Guards dropped to their knees, scales flashing through a rainbow of colors. Even the matriarch leaned forward, her ancient eyes wide. Only Admiral Solara remained standing, though I noticed her hands, all 4 of them, had clenched into fists. "Where did you acquire this?" The matriarch's voice was barely above a whisper. "The ruins on Kalairos, Your Eminence. I was conducting a standard archaeological survey when I found it in a sealed chamber." "And you brought it here," Solara said slowly, as if trying to understand an impossible equation. "A human found the primordial crown and brought it to us. Why?" "Because it's yours," I said simply. "It belongs to your people, your culture. I had no right to keep it." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel Tira's amusement bubbling through our connection, but she remained quiet. Finally, the matriarch spoke. "Do you understand what you've done, Dr. Cade?" "Returned stolen property." A sound came from the matriarch that I realized was laughter, dry and dusty as ancient parchment. "You've fulfilled a prophecy, young human. The crown of sages speaks of the seeker from the younger race, who would return the crown not for power or gain, but for honor. In doing so, they would herald a new age." "I'm sorry, what?" Solara stepped forward, her movements fluid and dangerous. "You've created a problem, human. By law and tradition, the one who returns the crown must be rewarded. The finder must be elevated to noble status, granted lands, and offered a binding alliance with our house." That's not necessary," I stammered. "I didn't do it for a reward." "Which is precisely why the law demands you receive one," the matriarch said. She gestured, and guards moved to flank me, not threateningly, but with ceremonial precision. "Dr. Ethan Cade, you are hereby elevated to the rank of Count within the Selvari nobility. You will be granted the frontier world of Kepler 386d as your domain. And as tradition demands, you will be offered a matrimonial alliance with House Selvar." My brain stopped processing somewhere around Count and completely shut down at matrimonial alliance. "I'm sorry, did you say marriage?" Solara's expression was unreadable. "Don't look so terrified, human. It's a political arrangement. Unless you've already formed a pair bond." "No, this is a lot to process." "Lord Cade," a new voice interrupted. "How fortuitous." I turned to see a figure entering the chamber, and my instincts immediately screamed danger. He was Vorthan, a race known for their political machinations, with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that held no warmth. "Senator Morrison," the matriarch acknowledged coolly. "You were not invited to this ceremony." "I was in the area when I heard the remarkable news," Morrison said, his voice oily smooth. "A human returning the primordial crown. How wonderfully convenient." "Convenient?" I asked, not liking his tone. "Oh, yes. You see, the conquered has been debating humanity's status for some time. There are those of us who believe your species would be better served in a more structured role. But now, with a human noble, well, that complicates things delightfully. Tira's voice suddenly rang in my head, urgent and angry. Ethan, he planned this. I can see it in the quantum signatures around him. He knew the crown was there. He expected someone to find it and try to use it for power. He didn't expect you to return it. Is there a problem? Senator Solara asked, her tone suggesting there had better not be. Morrison smiled, revealing far too many teeth. No problem at all, Admiral. In fact, I look forward to working with Lord Cade in his new position. The frontier worlds can be so dangerous for those unprepared for their challenges. The threat was barely veiled, but before anyone could respond, Morrison bowed mockingly and left. The atmosphere in the room shifted, becoming charged with tension. Well, I said into the silence, this got complicated fast. You have no idea, Solara muttered, then louder. Your Eminence, perhaps we should postpone the formal ceremonies until Lord Cade has had time to adjust to his new circumstances. The matriarch nodded slowly. Wise counsel, Lord Cade. You will be escorted to quarters befitting your new status. Tomorrow, we will discuss the details of your elevation and the challenges that await you on Kepler 38060. As guards moved to escort me out, Solara fell into step beside me. Out of earshot of the others, she spoke quietly. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen a human do. I'm leaning towards stupid myself. A ghost of a smile crossed her features. Morrison has been pushing for the Asset Race Protection Act for months. It would essentially turn humanity into a slave species, under the guise of protection. Your elevation to nobility just threw a massive wrench in his plans. Great. So instead of being a second-class citizen, I'm now a first-class target. Welcome to Conquered Politics, Lord Cade. She paused at a junction in the corridor. A word of advice. Your frontier world isn't the worthless rock Morrison thinks it is. There's a reason it was included in the traditional rewards. Before I could ask what she meant, she was gone, moving with military precision down another corridor. The guards led me to a suite that was larger than most human apartments, all gleaming surfaces and impossible angles. Well, Tira's voice echoed in my head, sounding far too amused. That went better than expected. You're now nobility, engaged to a terrifying hybrid warrior, and the proud owner of a mysterious frontier world. And you've made an enemy of one of the most dangerous politicians in the Conquered. All in a day's work for Ethan Cade, archaeological genius. I collapsed onto something that might have been a couch, staring at the crown I still somehow held. What have I gotten myself into? Oh, my dear Ethan, Tira purred. The fun is just beginning. Did you really think returning me would be simple? I've been waiting 3,000 years for entertainment this good. Outside the windows, the stars of the Concord sprawled in their billions, and somewhere among them was a frontier world that was now, apparently, mine. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, political maneuvering I was wholly unprepared for, and a marriage negotiation with a woman who could probably break me in half with her lower set of arms alone. But tonight, I was just Ethan Cade, accidental nobleman, wondering how a simple archaeological survey had turned into the opening move of a game I didn't know how to play. Tira, I asked the crown. Yes. Next time I try to do the right thing, remind me of this moment. Her laughter echoed through our connection, warm despite her digital nature. Oh, Ethan, where would be the fun in that? The next morning came too soon, announced by a chime that resonated through my bones rather than my ears. I groaned, rolling out of the Selvari-sized bed that had left me feeling like a child in their parents' furniture. Rise and shine, Count Cade. Tira's voice chirped in my head, far too cheerful for whatever ungodly hour it was. Your first day of nobility awaits. Try not to accidentally start any wars. You're enjoying this too much, I muttered, stumbling toward what I hoped was a bathroom. The Selvari architecture had a nasty habit of rearranging itself based on the occupant's needs. Which sounds helpful, until you're desperately searching for a toilet at 3 in the morning. 3,000 years of boredom. Ethan, let me have this. An hour later, dressed in clothes that had appeared in my quarters overnight, fitted perfectly, despite no one taking my measurements. I stood before an assembly that made the United Nations look like a neighborhood watch meeting. The great chamber of the conquered was a marvel of engineering, a sphere that somehow accommodated representatives from over 1,000 species, each in their own environmental bubble. Admiral Solara stood beside me, her dress uniform making her look even more imposing than the day before. She hadn't spoken beyond a curt greeting, but I caught her glancing at me occasionally, her expression unreadable. "Nervous?" she asked quietly, as we waited for the session to begin. "Terrified," I admitted. "I'm an archaeologist. I dig up old things and write papers nobody reads. I'm not equipped for this." "Neither was I when I received my first command," she said, surprising me. "I was an engineer, specializing in quantum propulsion systems. Then the Helix War happened, and suddenly I was commanding a ship because everyone else was dead." Her upper right hand clenched unconsciously. "We adapt, Dr. Cade. It's what living beings do." Before I could respond, the session commenced with a harmonic tone that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The speaker, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline matrix, pulsed with each word. "We gather to witness the elevation of Ethan Cade, human of Earth, to the nobility of House Selvar. Let any who object speak now." "I object." Morrison's voice cut through the chamber like a plasma blade. Of course he did. The senator stood in his delegation's box, his black skin seeming to absorb the light around him. "This elevation is highly irregular. The human clearly orchestrated this entire scenario for personal gain." "That's a lie," I started, but Solara's hand on my arm stopped me. "Let me," she whispered, then louder. "Senator Morrison, you question the honor of House Selvar. You suggest we would participate in fraud." "I suggest," Morrison said smoothly, "that humans are known for their creativity when it comes to advancement. How convenient that Dr. Cade just happened to find an artifact lost for millennia. How fortunate that he knew exactly where to return it." "If I may," a new voice interjected. I turned to see a Nexari ambassador rising, her tentacles writhing in what I knew was amusement. "My delegation has reviewed the sensor logs from Kalairos. The site had been scanned by over 40 expeditions in the last century alone. None detected the chamber. It only opened for Dr. Cade." Morrison's expression didn't change, but I saw his assistant lean in to whisper urgently. "Furthermore," the Nexari continued, "our analysis shows quantum signatures consistent with ancient technology. The chamber chose him. Unless the good senator suggests humans have mastered ancient tech." A ripple of laughter went through the assembly. The ancients were long gone, their technology so advanced that most species could barely understand it, let alone replicate it. "This proves my point," Morrison pivoted smoothly. "If the ancients' technology responds to humans, perhaps we should examine what role they should play in our society. For their own protection, of course." "Oh, he's good," Tira murmured in my head. "Turn your nobility into a threat. Classic political judo." The debate raged for another hour, with species taking sides based on their own interests rather than any concept of justice. I found myself growing angry at being discussed like I wasn't even there, like humanity was some pet project to be managed. Finally, the speaker called for order. "The elevation stands. Dr. Ethan Cade is hereby confirmed as Count of Kepler, 386D, with all rights and responsibilities thereof. The marriage alliance with House Selvar will proceed according to custom." The energy being pulsed once more. "Count Cade, You have the floor." I hadn't expected that. Hundreds of alien eyes turned to me, waiting. Solara gave me a tiny nod of encouragement. "I didn't ask for this," I began, my voice sounding thin in the vast chamber. "I'm not a politician or a soldier. I'm a scientist who likes digging in the dirt and solving puzzles. But Senator Morrison is right about one thing. Humans are creative." I paused, finding my courage. We're creative because we've had to be. In a galaxy where we're considered barely civilized, where we're tolerated but not respected, we've learned to adapt. We've taken your discarded worlds and made them bloom. We've solved problems you said were impossible, not because we're special, but because no one expected us to succeed. My voice grew stronger. I returned the crown because it was the right thing to do. If that threatens some people's perception of humanity, maybe it's their perception that needs changing, not us. The chamber erupted. Some delegations applauded, others booed. Morrison's expression had gone cold, calculating. I just painted a target on my back, but I found I didn't care. "Eloquently spoken," Solara said as we left the chamber. "Stupidly, but eloquently. You really need to work on your compliments." "I don't give compliments. I give assessments." She paused at a junction. "Your shuttle to Kepler 386d leaves in 6 hours. I suggest you use the time to review the files on your new domain. What about the marriage alliance?" Her expression was unreadable. "That will be negotiated over time. Selvari courtships can last decades. Don't look so relieved. Count, you haven't escaped, merely delayed." She walked away, leaving me standing in the corridor with Tira laughing in my head. The files on Kepler 386d were not encouraging. The planet was on the far edge of conquered space. Technically habitable, but barely. The atmosphere was thin, the soil poor, and the previous colonial attempts had all failed within a decade. The only thing of note was a series of energy readings that didn't match any known phenomena. "Congratulations," Tira said dryly. "You're the proud owner of a radioactive rock with delusions of grandeur." "There has to be more to it." Solara said it wasn't worthless. "Solara says a lot of things. Have you considered she might want you out of the way? Dead nobles can't complicate marriage negotiations." I was about to respond when my door chimed. I opened it to find a human standing there, which was surprising enough in the Selvari embassy. He was older, weathered, with the kind of scars that spoke of a life lived hard. "Count Cade, I'm Roger Harrison, your new chief of staff." "I have a staff?" "You have a planet, my lord. That requires infrastructure." He entered without invitation, pulling out a data pad. "I've taken the liberty of assembling a basic team. We'll need agricultural specialists, engineers, security personnel." "Wait, slow down. Who assigned you to me?" Harrison smiled. "Admiral Solara thought you might need someone who understands both human and conquered politics. I served with her during the Helix War." "Your military was. Now I'm what you might call a professional survivor. And if we're going to make anything of that dustball you've been given, you'll need every bit of help you can get." Over the next 4 hours, Harrison laid out the brutal reality of my situation. Kepler 386d wasn't just a difficult world, it was a death trap. The previous colonies had failed due to a combination of factors: hostile wildlife, unpredictable weather patterns, and something the reports only referred to as technical anomalies. "What kind of anomalies?" I asked. "The kind that make equipment fail and people disappear," Harrison said bluntly. "But here's the interesting part. The failures all happened in the same region, around something called the nexus point." "Which is?" "Nobody knows. Every expedition sent to investigate either turned back reporting equipment failures or didn't come back at all." I pulled up the energy readings I'd noticed earlier. They were centered on this nexus point, whatever it was. My archaeological instincts started tingling. "Ancient tech?" I asked Tira privately. "Possibly. The energy signatures are familiar, but different. like someone took ancient technology and modified it. Badly. The shuttle to Kepler 386d was utilitarian at best, cramped at worst. Besides Harrison and myself, there were 20 others: engineers, botanists, security personnel, and a few whose specialties I couldn't guess. All human, I noticed. Couldn't get any other species to come? I asked Harrison. Didn't try. You need people who understand what it's like to build from nothing, to make do with scraps. That's our specialty, not theirs. The journey took 3 days through hyperspace, during which I learned more about my new subjects than I'd ever wanted to know. The botanist, Sarah Park, had been blacklisted from academic positions for proposing radical terraforming techniques. The engineer, James Crawford, had spent 5 years in prison for hacking corporate databases to expose safety violations. They were all outcasts in one way or another. People who didn't fit into the neat categories the Conquered preferred. "You're building a colony of misfits," Tira observed. "Says the AI who's been stuck in a crown for 3 millennia. Touché. Kepler 386d looked even worse in person than in the files. The planet was a mottled brown and gray ball, with thin wisps of atmosphere clinging to it like a shabby coat. The main settlement, grandly named New Hope by some previous optimist, was a collection of prefab buildings slowly being reclaimed by the desert. "Home sweet home," Harrison said as we descended. "Population 347 humans who couldn't afford passage anywhere else." That's it. Did you expect a thriving metropolis? The Conquered dumped the bare minimum here to maintain their claim. Most supplies have to be imported at ridiculous costs. We landed in what passed for a spaceport, a flat area of fused sand with a few automated beacons. The welcoming committee consisted of 3 people who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Count Cade, the leader, a woman with sun-damaged skin and tired eyes, said without enthusiasm, "I'm Administrator Walsh. Welcome to the end of the galaxy." "Thank you for the warm welcome," I said dryly. "Shall we skip the pleasantries and discuss what needs doing?" Walsh blinked, apparently surprised by my directness. "Of course, this way." The administrative building was one of the few structures with working environmental systems, though even those wheezed ominously. Walsh laid out the colony's problems with the efficiency of someone who'd given this briefing too many times. Water reclamation is at 60% efficiency and dropping. Food production meets 40% of our needs. The rest comes from supply drops every 3 months, assuming they remember we exist. Power generation is sporadic at best, and we've lost 2 mining teams in the eastern sectors. "Lost how?" Harrison asked. "Equipment failures. Navigation systems go haywire. Communications cut out. One team made it back reporting hallucinations. The other," she shrugged. "The nexus point," I said. Walsh's expression hardened. "Stay away from there, Count. Nothing good comes from poking at things we don't understand." "Actually, that's literally my job description," I said. "I'm an archaeologist. Poking at things we don't understand is what I do. Then you'll fit right in with the other fools who've gotten themselves killed here." That evening, I stood on the roof of the administrative building, looking out at my domain. The sun, a dim orange ball, was setting behind mountains that looked like broken teeth. The air was thin enough that I could see stars appearing before full darkness. "Regretting your noble gesture yet?" Tira asked. "Ask me in a month," I replied. "If we last that long." "Oh, we'll last. The question is whether you'll still be sane." She paused. "There's something about this place, Ethan. Something in the quantum foam. It's like reality is thinner here." "Meaning?" "I'm not sure yet. But be careful. This isn't just a colony on a harsh world. There's a reason the Selvari included this in their traditional rewards. They knew something." A shuttle roar interrupted my brooding. I looked up to see a sleek military vessel descending, its hull bearing the markings of the Selvari fleet. It landed with precision on the makeshift pad, and a familiar figure emerged. Admiral Solara, now in combat gear rather than dress uniform, strode across the sand as if she owned it. Behind her, a squad of Selvari Marines in power armor followed in perfect formation. "Admiral," I said as she approached, "this is unexpected." "Count Cade," she nodded. "I thought I should inspect your progress and bring a warning." "Another one I'm starting a collection?" Her expression didn't change, but I thought I caught a glimmer of amusement in her eyes. "Morrison isn't satisfied with your elevation. He's pushing for an inspection of your colony in 6 months. If you haven't shown significant progress, he'll use it as evidence that humans can't handle responsibility." 6 months, that's impossible." "Yes," she agreed. "Which is why I'm here. House Selvar has a vested interest in your success now. We're bound by the alliance, even if unconsummated." She gestured to her Marines. "These soldiers will remain to help establish security. I've also arranged for additional supplies and equipment." "Why?" I asked bluntly. "What's really going on here?" She studied me for a moment, then made a decision. "Walk with me, Count." We moved away from the buildings, out into the desert where the only witnesses were the stars and Tira in my head. "The primordial crown wasn't just a symbol of authority," Solara said finally. "It was a key. The ancients left facilities throughout the galaxy, locked and waiting. The crown identifies those worthy to access them." "And there's one here," I said, understanding dawning. "We believe so. The energy readings, the equipment failures, they're all consistent with a damaged or partially active ancient facility. If you can find it, activate it properly." "It changes everything. Humanity gets access to ancient technology. Morrison's plans fall apart, and the balance of power shifts." "You understand quickly. Good." She stopped walking, turning to face me fully. "But understand this as well. If Morrison learns of this, he'll stop at nothing to prevent your success. He has allies, resources, and fewer scruples than a Vraxian blood merchant. And I have a broken colony, a sarcastic AI, and apparently a fiancé who thinks I'm in over my head. You also have determination, creativity, and a talent for doing the unexpected." She paused. "And you're not wrong about being over your head. But that's never stopped humans before." In the distance, something howled, long and mournful. The sound sent chills down my spine, reminding me that we weren't alone on this world. "What was that?" I asked. "Sand wraiths," Solara said casually. "They hunt at night, usually avoid settlements. But hunger makes them bold. Another challenge for your colony." "Wonderful. Any other nightmares I should know about?" "Several. But that's for tomorrow. Tonight, you should rest. Tomorrow, we begin turning this wasteland into something that will make Morrison choke on his own schemes." She turned to go, then paused. "Oh, and Count, the marriage negotiations will begin once you've stabilized the colony. Try not to die before then. It would be inconvenient." As she walked back to her shuttle, Tira chuckled in my head. "I think she likes you. She has a funny way of showing it. Selvari courtship rituals involve tests of strength, intelligence, and survival. Congratulations. You're already in the middle of one." I watched the shuttle lift off, carrying Solara back to whatever command she was technically supposed to be at, instead of checking on a minor noble's struggling colony. The Selvari Marines remained, already setting up defensive positions with an efficiency that made our efforts look amateurish. "So," Harrison said, appearing beside me with 2 cups of something that might charitably be called coffee. "Ancient technology, political conspiracies, and hostile wildlife. Just another day in paradise. You knew about the ancient facility." "Suspected. I've been around long enough to recognize the signs. The question is, are you crazy enough to go looking for it?" I sipped the terrible coffee, looking out at the dark desert where something had howled. Somewhere out there was a mystery that could change humanity's fate. Morrison was probably already planning his next move. The colony was barely surviving, and I had 6 months to turn it all around. Crazy, I said finally. Harrison. I returned a priceless artifact instead of selling it to the highest bidder. I accepted a noble title I didn't want and a marriage alliance I didn't ask for. I'm standing on a death world at the edge of nowhere because I thought it was the right thing to do. What do you think? He smiled, the first genuine expression I'd seen from him. I think Morrison has no idea what he's started. Good. Let's keep it that way. Tomorrow, we start exploring. Time to find out what's worth dying for on this rock. As I headed back inside, Tira spoke up one last time. Ethan. Yeah. For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. All of them. Thanks. Now help me figure out how to keep us all alive long enough to prove it. The stars wheeled overhead. Alien constellations watching as humanity once again prepared to do what it did best: survive, adapt, and thrive in the face of impossible odds. Morrison thought he'd won by giving me this poisoned gift of a world. He was about to learn why betting against human stubbornness was a losing proposition. The morning sun on Kepler 386d had all the warmth of a dying flashlight, casting long shadows across the settlement as I stood before my assembled team. 23 humans, including myself, about to venture into the desert toward what everyone assured me was certain death. Just another Tuesday in my new life as a noble. The nexus point is approximately 40 kilometers northeast, I said, pointing to the holomap Harrison had procured. Previous expeditions have reported equipment failures, starting at the 30-kilometer mark. We'll establish a base camp at 25 and proceed on foot. That's insane, Administrator Walsh interjected, from where she stood at the back of the group. I've lost good people to that thing. And hiding from it hasn't made it go away, I countered. Whatever's out there is the key to this planet. We can either cower in our failing settlement or face it head on. James Crawford, my head engineer, raised his hand. What about the electromagnetic interference? Our equipment won't last 5 minutes in that field. Which is why we're taking these, Harrison said, unveiling a crate of equipment that looked like it had been salvaged from a museum. Purely mechanical devices, compasses, manual tools, even old-fashioned chemical cameras. Can't interfere with what doesn't have circuits. Clever, Tira commented in my head. Primitive, but clever, like humans in general. Sarah Park, the botanist, was studying her scanner intently. Count Cade, there's something else. The plant samples I've been analyzing from the eastern regions show signs of genetic manipulation. Ancient manipulation. That got everyone's attention. Meaning, I asked. Someone tried to terraform this planet long ago. The native flora has been altered at a fundamental level, but the modifications are breaking down. That's why nothing grows properly anymore. The ancients tried to make this world a garden. Solara's voice came from behind me. The Admiral had stayed behind after her inspection, ostensibly to oversee her Marines, but really, I suspected, to watch this unfold. When they vanished, their maintenance systems failed. The planet has been dying ever since. Then maybe we can fix it, I said, warming to the idea. If we can access the facility, understand their technology, you could restore the terraforming systems, Sarah finished, her eyes lighting up. Bring this world back to life. Or die trying, Walsh muttered. That's always an option, I agreed cheerfully. But I prefer the living version. We leave in 1 hour, bring water, rations for 3 days, and whatever passes for courage around here. As the team dispersed to prepare, Solara approached me. She'd traded her combat armor for desert gear that somehow made her look even more dangerous, all 4 arms moving with casual grace. You're enjoying this, she observed. Is that so strange? I spent years begging for funding to explore dead ruins, writing grant proposals that went nowhere. Now I have a planet-sized mystery, and no committee telling me it's too dangerous. Most humans would find that terrifying, Most humans haven't spent their careers being told they're not good enough, smart enough, or important enough to matter. I checked my equipment pack, more to have something to do with my hands than out of necessity. When you're used to having nothing, risking everything doesn't seem like such a big deal. She was quiet for a moment. Is that why you returned the crown, because you had nothing to lose? No, I said, meeting her unusual eyes. I returned it because it was the right thing to do. The risk just made it interesting. A ghost of a smile crossed her features. The marriage negotiations should be fascinating. Assuming I survive the day. Yes, she agreed, assuming that. The convoy consisted of 3 sandcrawlers, ancient vehicles that ran on combustion engines, and human stubbornness. I rode in the lead vehicle with Harrison, Crawford, and 2 of Solara's Marines. The Admiral herself commanded the second vehicle, while the third carried supplies and the more nervous members of our expedition. The landscape changed as we moved away from the settlement. The bare rock and sand gave way to twisted formations that looked almost organic, like frozen screams in stone. The few plants we saw were wrong somehow. Leaves that shifted color when you weren't looking directly at them. Root systems that formed perfect mathematical spirals. Creepy as hell, Crawford muttered, documenting everything with his chemical camera. Beautiful, Sarah countered over the radio from Vehicle 2. Look at the fractals in those formations. Nature doesn't create patterns that precise. This is engineered beauty. 20 kilometers out, the first equipment failure hit. The crawler's navigation system sparked and died, followed quickly by the radio. We were prepared for this, switching to predetermined hand signals and continuing forward. The mechanical engines, blessed be their primitive simplicity, kept running. At 25 kilometers, we established base camp in the shadow of a rock formation that looked disturbingly like a hand reaching from the sand. The air here was different, charged with potential that made my skin prickle. Anyone else feeling that? Harrison asked, rubbing his arms. Static buildup, Crawford explained. The electromagnetic field is intensifying. We should ground ourselves before moving forward. It's more than that, Tira said privately to me. The boundary between dimensions is thin here. The facility isn't just damaged, it's leaking. Leaking what? Reality. Other possibilities. The ancients didn't just manipulate matter and energy. Ethan. They manipulated probability itself. That was comforting. We proceeded on foot, leaving a small team to guard the base camp. The closer we got to the nexus point, the stranger things became. Rocks seemed to shift position when I looked away. The sun appeared to skip across the sky in jerky movements. At one point, I could have sworn I saw myself walking parallel to our group, about 50 meters to the left, before the image flickered and vanished. Temporal echoes, Solara said quietly beside me. I've seen this before, in the ruins on Thessia Prime. We're approaching a point where time isn't quite linear. And you didn't think to mention this earlier. Would it have changed your decision to come here? No, I admitted. But I might have brought aspirin. 30 kilometers. This was where previous expeditions had turned back or disappeared. The air itself seemed to thicken, taking on an oily quality that made breathing difficult. Several team members stumbled, reporting dizziness and disorientation. Push through, I ordered, though I felt it too. Whatever's protecting this place wants us to leave. That means we're close. Or it means we're about to die horribly, Crawford pointed out. Glass half full, James. Glass half full. Then we saw it. The nexus point wasn't what I'd expected. Instead of some grand structure or obvious facility, there was simply a sphere of absolute nothing hanging in the air. Not darkness, not light, just an absence that hurt to perceive. It was about 20 meters in diameter, perfectly smooth, and utterly wrong. My God, Sarah breathed. No, Tira corrected in my head. Not God, the ancients, and they were much more ambitious. The team spread out, maintaining safe distances while documenting everything. I approached slowly, feeling the crown in my pack growing warm, even through its containment field. "Count Cade," one of the Marines called out. "You need to see this." He was standing near a formation of crystallized sand that formed a perfect circle around the sphere. As I got closer, I could see symbols etched into the crystals, the same script I'd seen in the chamber, where I'd found the crown. "It's a lock," I realized. "The whole thing is one massive lock." "And you have the key," Solara said. It wasn't a question. I pulled out the crown, its metal singing in harmony with the sphere. The moment it cleared the containment field, the symbols began to glow. "Everyone back," I ordered. "We don't know what this will do." "Ethan," Tira said urgently, "the facility is damaged. If you activate it without proper calibration, then tell me how to calibrate it." "Put me on. Let me interface directly with the systems." I looked at the crown, then at my team watching expectantly. Wearing an AI-inhabited artifact near an unstable, ancient facility seemed like the kind of decision that would be cited in future textbooks under what not to do. But then again, my whole life recently had been a series of terrible decisions that somehow worked out. "If this kills me," I said to no one in particular, "tell them I died doing something stupidly heroic." I placed the crown on my head. The world exploded into information. Not visual or auditory, but pure data streaming directly into my consciousness. I saw, felt, knew the history of this place in an instant. The ancients had built this not as a colony, but as an experiment in dimensional engineering. They were trying to create a stable pocket of space, where the laws of physics could be rewritten at will. "They succeeded," Tira said, her voice now coming from everywhere. "But they succeeded too well. When they vanished, the automatic systems kept running, kept experimenting, kept fracturing reality. Through the data stream, I could see the controls, vast networks of quantum processors that made modern technology look like stone tools. But I could also see the damage, cascading failures that threatened to tear the planet apart at a subatomic level." "Can we fix it?" "Not fix, but we can stabilize it, repurpose it, make it safe and useful instead of a ticking bomb." I felt more than heard the concern from my team as I stood motionless, crown blazing with light. Through Tira's interface, I reached out to the facility's controls, inputting new parameters, shutting down dangerous experiments, redirecting energy flows. The sphere began to change. The nothingness filled with light, then form, revealing a structure that defied conventional geometry. It was a building that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously, only showing us the 3 we could perceive. "Almost there," Tira said. "Just need to... Oh no." "What oh no? I hate oh no. We're not alone in here. Something else has been using the damaged systems, something that noticed us." The ground began to shake. Not like an earthquake, but like reality itself was having a seizure. From the sand around us, figures began to emerge. They might have been human once, or Selvari, or any of a dozen species. Now they were something else, twisted by exposure to raw dimensional energy into forms that shouldn't exist. "The missing colonists," Harrison said, raising his weapon. "Don't shoot," I yelled. "They're not hostile, they're trapped, caught between dimensions." One of the figures stumbled toward us, its form flickering between solid and translucent. When it spoke, its voice came from 3 moments in time simultaneously. "Help us, please." "Tira, can we save them?" "Maybe, but it'll take most of the facility's power. We won't be able to use it for anything else for months." I didn't hesitate. "Do it. Ethan, think about this. Morrison is coming in 6 months. Without the facility's resources..." I said do it. The crown flared brighter, and I felt Tira redirecting the facility's energy into a massive stabilization field. One by one, the twisted figures solidified, their forms settling back into normal 3-dimensional space. Humans, Vorthon, even a few Selvari, all colonists who'd vanished over the years. They collapsed as soon as they were fully corporeal, but they were alive, broken, traumatized, but alive. Medical team. Now. Harrison barked into his restored radio, the electromagnetic interference fading as the facility stabilized. I pulled the crown off, my head feeling like it had been used as a drum in a particularly enthusiastic concert. Solara caught me as I swayed. "That was incredibly noble," she said, "and incredibly stupid. Story of my life lately." I looked at the facility, now visible as a beautiful crystalline structure that seemed to sing in the desert air. We could have used its power to transform the colony instantly. Instead, we burned it, saving a few dozen people. "Yes," she agreed. "You did. And that's why you'll succeed where Morrison will fail. Because I make bad tactical decisions. Because you make human decisions. Compassionate ones. The ancients had all the power in the universe, and they still vanished. Maybe they forgot that power without wisdom, without compassion, is just another form of extinction." The rescued colonists were being treated by our medical team, some crying, others staring at the sky as if they'd never see it again. Administrator Walsh was among them, looking haggard but whole. "Count," she managed, her voice hoarse. I was wrong about you." "You were right, actually. I am a fool who pokes at things I don't understand. I just got lucky this time." She shook her head. "No. You chose to save us instead of saving yourself. That's not luck. That's leadership." As we organized the evacuation back to base camp, Tira spoke privately to me. "You know Morrison will use this against you, wasting resources on a rescue instead of development. Let him. We'll find another way to build the colony. With what the facility needs months to recharge, and you have weeks before the next supply run. Then we'll do what humans do best. We'll improvise." The journey back was slow, carrying the wounded and weakened survivors. But something had changed in the expedition team. They moved with purpose now, with pride. We'd faced the unknown and brought people home. As we reached base camp, Sarah approached me with a sample container. Inside were seeds, but unlike any I'd seen before, glowing faintly with their own light. "I found these near the facility," she said excitedly. "They're original ancient stock, preserved in the dimensional field. If I can cultivate them, adapt them to current conditions." "We could feed the colony," I finished. "More than that. We could start the terraforming process again, naturally this time. It'll take years, maybe decades, but it's hope," I said. "And sometimes that's enough." That night, back in the settlement, I stood on the same rooftop where I'd contemplated my new life just days before. The rescued colonists were being treated, some already sharing their experiences in the dimensional void. The facility stood dormant but stable in the distance, a promise of future possibilities. "Regrets?" Solara asked, joining me. She moved so quietly, I hadn't heard her approach. "About saving them, never. About everything else, jury's still out." She was quiet for a moment, then spoke carefully. "The marriage negotiations don't have to proceed if you prefer. House Selvar would understand if you wish to focus on your colony without complications." I looked at her. Really looked at her. Beyond the forearms and scaled skin, beyond the military bearing and careful control, I saw someone who'd been watching, evaluating, and had come to a decision. "Would you prefer that?" I asked. "What I prefer is irrelevant. This is about politics, not personal feelings." "Bullshit," I said, surprising us both with my vehemence. "Everything I've done since finding that crown has been about rejecting politics in favor of doing what's right. Why should this be different?" Her expression cracked slightly, showing something vulnerable beneath. "Because I'm not fully Selvari. I'm not fully human. I'm not fully anything. In the Conquered, that makes me valuable as a military asset, but problematic as a marriage prospect. And I'm a failed archaeologist playing at being a noble on a dying world at the edge of nowhere. We're quite a pair. Yes, she said softly. We are. The moment stretched between us, full of possibility. Then Harrison's voice crackled over the comm, shattering it. Count Cade, we have a problem. Long-range sensors are picking up ships approaching. 3 vessels. Vorthan configuration. Morrison, I said. Too soon, Solara said, her command mask sliding back into place. He shouldn't be able to move this quickly. We rushed to the command center, where Harrison had the sensor display up. 3 ships, definitely military. Less than a day out. He's not waiting for the 6-month inspection, I realized. He's coming now, while we're weak. My Marines can hold the settlement, Solara said, already calculating defensive positions. But not against 3 warships. Then we don't fight, I said, an idea forming. We do something he won't expect. Which is, I smiled, feeling Tira's presence in the back of my mind, already understanding what I was planning. We invite him in for dinner. The room stared at me like I'd lost my mind, which, to be fair, was a reasonable assumption. Ethan, Tira said carefully, you do remember this is the man trying to enslave your entire species, right? Oh, I remember. But he's also a politician. And politicians have one weakness. I turned to my staff. They can't resist an audience. Harrison, break out whatever passes for our best food. Sarah, make the settlement look as prosperous as possible. James, get that facility visible on every scanner. What are you planning? Solara asked. Morrison expects to find a failing colony he can use as evidence against humanity. Instead, he's going to find a thriving settlement that just rescued dozens of lost colonists using ancient technology. I grinned. And he's going to find it all on camera, broadcast live to the conquered. Understanding dawned in her eyes. You're going to make him part of your success story. Politics works both ways. He can't attack the colony that just performed a miraculous rescue without looking like a monster. And if he's here when we announce the ancient agricultural discoveries, he'll have to publicly support you or risk losing face. Harrison finished. Count. That's either brilliant or suicidal. Why not both? We have 20 hours. Let's make them count. As everyone scattered to prepare, Solara lingered. This is why you returned the crown, isn't it? Not just because it was right, but because you knew it would change things. I hoped it would. I never imagined this, but I gestured at the controlled chaos around us. Sometimes the best archaeology happens in the present, not the past. Indeed. She paused at the door. For what it's worth, Ethan, I would not find the marriage negotiations objectionable. Before I could respond, she was gone, leaving me with a grinning AI and the mother of all diplomatic gambits to prepare. You know, Tira said thoughtfully, when I chose you to find me, I expected entertainment. I never expected inspiration. Chose me. Did you think it was coincidence that the chamber opened only for you? I've been waiting 3,000 years for someone who would do the right thing, simply because it was right. The ancients built me to serve power, but I think I prefer serving purpose. Then help me serve Morrison the political meal of his life. With absolute pleasure. Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance, uncaring of our small dramas. But on this small, dying world at the edge of everything, humanity was about to prove once again that sometimes the smallest players could change the game entirely. Morrison wanted to play politics. He was about to learn why humans, for all their supposed weaknesses, had survived and thrived in a galaxy that saw them as second-class citizens. We didn't just endure, we evolved. And evolution was about to bite Morrison, right in his political aspirations. The next 20 hours passed in a blur of controlled chaos. I'd never tried to transform a dying colony into a showpiece of human achievement overnight. But apparently, there was a first time for everything. "More lights on the medical facility," I called out, watching as colonists strung up every functional illumination device we had. "I want it glowing like a beacon when Morrison's ships arrive." Sarah Park had worked miracles with the ancient seeds, creating a small demonstration garden that glowed softly in the twilight. The plants grew at an accelerated rate, their bioluminescent properties making them look like something from a fairy tale rather than desperate agricultural experiment. "Count Cade," James Crawford approached, covered in grease and sand. "We've got the facility's exterior lit up. It's visible from orbit now. Looks impressive as hell, even if it's running on emergency power." "Perfect. How about the communication array?" "Harrison's got it locked onto every major newsfeed in the Concord. The moment Morrison lands, we'll be broadcasting live to trillions." I nodded, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. In archaeology, if you made a mistake, you misidentified a pottery shard. Here, a mistake could doom my entire species to slavery. "Second thoughts," Tira asked in my mind. "Third and fourth thoughts," I admitted silently. "But we're committed now." Solara appeared at my elbow, having changed into her full dress uniform. The medals and rank insignia caught the light impressively, reminding everyone that House Selvar had military weight behind it. "My Marines report Morrison's ships have dropped out of hyperspace," she said quietly. "They're not responding to standard hails. He wants to make an entrance. Let him." I straightened my own clothes, a blend of human formal wear and Selvari noble regalia that somehow worked. "Is everyone clear on their roles?" "The rescued colonists are ready to share their stories," Harrison confirmed. "Administrator Walsh has prepared a particularly moving account of her time in the dimensional void." "Good. Morrison expects to find failure and desperation. Instead, he'll find heroes and hope." I took a deep breath. Places, everyone, showtime. The Vorthan ships descended like predatory birds, their black hulls absorbing light rather than reflecting it. They landed in perfect formation just outside the settlement, kicking up dust clouds that glowed eerily in the light from our displays. Morrison emerged first, flanked by armed guards and what looked like a full media crew of his own. He'd come prepared to document our failure. His obsidian skin seemed to ripple with satisfaction as he surveyed the settlement, though I caught a flicker of surprise at the obvious activity and illumination. "Count Cade," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the thin air. "I trust you don't mind an early inspection. I was in the area and thought I'd see how humanity's newest noble was faring." Senator Morrison," I replied, stepping forward with a warm smile that I definitely didn't feel. "What perfect timing. We were just about to broadcast our first major achievement to the Concord. Your presence will add legitimacy to the announcement." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Achievement in less than a week." "Oh, yes. But where are my manners? You must be tired from your journey. We've prepared a meal with fresh vegetables from our new gardens, grown from ancient stock, if you can believe it." Ancient stock. The surprise in his voice was genuine now. "Please, allow me to show you." I gestured toward the glowing garden, noting how his media crew immediately began recording. "Though I should warn you, we're also broadcasting live. I'm sure the Concord will be fascinated to see a senator taking such personal interest in a frontier colony's development." Morrison's jaw tightened as he realized the trap. Refuse hospitality while being broadcast live, and he'd appear petty. Accept, and he'd be validating our success. "How thoughtful," he said through what might charitably be called a smile. "Lead the way, Count." The tour was a masterpiece of political theater. Sarah explained the ancient seeds with infectious enthusiasm, showing how they could grow in the poor soil and produce nutrients specifically tailored to multiple species' needs. The rescued colonists, looking remarkably healthy, thanks to some creative lighting and makeup, shared their harrowing stories of dimensional imprisonment and their gratitude for the rescue. Morrison's expression grew more strained with each success we showcased. His own media crew was recording everything, unable to stop without looking suspicious, while our broadcast reached across the galaxy. "Remarkable," he said as we sat for the meal, his tone suggesting it was anything but. "And you accomplished this by activating ancient technology. How convenient that it responded to a human." "Not just any human," I corrected, letting a note of pride enter my voice. "The Crown chose me, Senator, just as the facility's systems recognized human neural patterns as compatible with ancient interfaces. It seems the ancients built their technology to respond to certain qualities rather than specific species. Qualities such as compassion," Administrator Walsh interjected, her eyes hard as she stared at Morrison. "Count Cade could have used the facility's power for material gain. Instead, he used it to save lives. Those of us who were trapped owe him everything." The other rescued colonists murmured agreement, their testimony carrying the weight of lived experience. Morrison's aides exchanged glances, recognizing the narrative shifting away from their control. "Of course. We couldn't have done it without Silvari support," I added, nodding to Solara. "The alliance between our houses has already borne fruit. Imagine what could be accomplished with proper backing from the Senate." Morrison set down his utensil with deliberate precision. "Indeed. And what would you need from the Senate, Count Cade?" Here it was, the moment to turn defense into offense. "Recognition," I said simply. "Not special treatment. Just acknowledgement that humanity can contribute more than manual labor and military service. We've proven we can work with ancient technology, revolutionize agriculture, and save lives. All we ask is the chance to prove it on a larger scale." "You're asking for significant resources based on 1 week's work," Morrison countered. "I'm asking for the same chance every species got when they joined the Concord," I replied. "The Vorthon were given mining rights that made your people wealthy. The Nexari received trade routes. Even the Selvari were granted military contracts. All we want is the opportunity to show what humanity can offer." The garden glowed softly around us, alien plants that could feed billions. The rescued colonists sat as living proof of human ingenuity and compassion. The ancient facility gleamed in the distance, a promise of wonders yet to be unlocked. Morrison was trapped, and we both knew it. Billions were watching across the Concord. If he denied reasonable requests now, he'd appear to be actively suppressing humanity rather than protecting us. "The Senate will consider your requests," he said finally. "In the meantime, I'm sure you'll continue your excellent work here." "With your public support, I'm certain we will," I said, raising my glass. "To cooperation between species. May it benefit all." He had no choice but to drink to that, his own media crew capturing the moment. The toast tasted like victory, tinged with the metallic flavor of political maneuvering. The rest of the meal passed in tense pleasantries. Morrison tried several times to find flaws in our presentation, but we'd prepared too well. Every challenge was met with evidence, every doubt countered with rescued colonist testimony. Finally, as the dim sun began to set, Morrison stood to leave. "Count Cade, you've certainly provided an educational experience." "Thank you, Senator. I hope this is the beginning of a productive relationship. After all, we're all working toward the same goal, aren't we? The prosperity and security of the Concord." His smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Indeed. I look forward to your 6-month review with great interest." As his delegation prepared to depart, one of his aides approached me discreetly. She was young, nervous, clearly conflicted about something. "Count Cade," she whispered, "be careful. The Senator has allies you haven't seen yet. This isn't over." Before I could respond, she hurried after Morrison, leaving me with more questions than answers. The ships lifted off in a cloud of dust and dry flames, carrying away our unwelcome guests, but leaving behind the certainty of future conflicts. Well, Harrison said once they were gone, that was either brilliant or we just painted a bigger target on our backs. Both, I admitted, exhaustion suddenly hitting me like a gravity wave. But at least now it's a public target. Harder to hit us when everyone's watching. Ethan, Solara's voice was soft, concerned. You played that perfectly. But Morrison won't forget this humiliation. He'll come at you sideways next time. I know. But we bought time. And that's what we needed. I looked around at the colonists, still buzzing with excitement from their performance. Plus, we gave them something to believe in. That's worth any risk. She studied me for a long moment. You really don't think like an archaeologist anymore. Sure I do. I just realized that sometimes you have to make history instead of just studying it. That night, I found myself back in the ancient facility with Tira. The Crown's interface allowed me to perceive the complex dimensional mathematics underlying the structure, even if I couldn't fully understand it. You did well today, Tira said, her presence warm in my mind. Though you realize Morrison will be analyzing every word, every gesture, looking for weaknesses. Let him look. We'll be too busy building to care. I touched one of the crystal panels, feeling the potential thrumming beneath. How long until the facility can operate at full capacity again? 3 months for basic functions, 6 for anything advanced, unless we find the other facilities. This isn't the only one on the planet. Ethan, the ancients built a network. Most are dormant, but if we could activate them, link them together, we could transform this world completely. The implications were staggering. Why didn't you mention this before? Because I wasn't sure you were ready. Power corrupts, even with the best intentions. But after today, seeing how you used what little we had for others rather than yourself, I think you might be the first person in 3 millennia who can handle what the ancients left behind. No pressure or anything. Oh, enormous pressure. The fate of your species. This world. Possibly the conquered itself. But hey, you're good with pressure. You returned a priceless artifact instead of keeping it. I laughed, the sound echoing strangely in the crystalline chamber. When you put it that way, this seems easy by comparison. Nothing about this will be easy, Tira warned. Morrison was right about one thing. You've had 1 week's success, building a lasting colony, proving humanity's worth, navigating Selvari marriage customs. These are challenges that would break most people. Good thing I'm too stubborn to know when I'm broken. That's what I'm counting on. I spent another hour in the facility, learning what I could about its systems. The mathematics involved made my head spin, but I was beginning to grasp the edges of ancient thinking. They didn't see technology as separate from nature or consciousness. To them, it was all one system, infinitely interconnected. When I finally emerged, I found Solara waiting outside, silhouetted against the stars. She stood perfectly still, a statue carved from military discipline and alien grace. Couldn't sleep, I asked, joining her. Selvari require less rest than humans. 4 hours every 3 days is sufficient. She paused. I was thinking about your performance today. You maneuvered Morrison as effectively as any politician I've seen. I had good teachers. Years of faculty meetings taught me that academics can be just as vicious as any senator. That's not what I mean. She turned to face me, her dual-pupiled eyes reflecting the facility's glow. You could have used this situation for personal gain, demanded wealth, power, status. Instead, you keep focusing on others, your species, the colonists, even Morrison's aide who warned you. You caught that? Very little escapes my notice. The question is why, what drives you, Ethan Cade? I considered the question seriously. It deserved a real answer, not a flippant response. I spent my whole career studying dead civilizations, the ancients, the progenitors, dozens of species that reached for the stars and fell. You know what they all had in common. She waited silently. They forgot that power without purpose is meaningless. They built monuments to themselves instead of futures for their children. They conquered instead of connected. I gestured at the facility. The ancients could reshape reality itself, and they still vanished. Maybe because they forgot that the point of power is to lift others up, not hold them down. A romantic view. Maybe, but romance beats cynicism any day. She was quiet for a long moment. The marriage negotiations, she said finally. My mother expects me to treat them as a political arrangement, produce an heir to cement the alliance, maintain separate lives otherwise. And what do you expect? I'm not sure anymore. The admission seemed to surprise her. I've spent my life being the perfect soldier, the ideal hybrid of two species. I've never had to consider what I actually want. Well, what do you want? She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen from her before. Vulnerable, uncertain. Something real, not an arrangement or an alliance, but a partnership. Someone who sees me as more than just a useful military asset or a political bridge between species. I see a woman who stayed to help when she could have left, I said softly. Who commands respect through competence, not fear. Who's trying to figure out how to be herself in a galaxy that keeps trying to define her as half of two things instead of whole in her own right. You see all that? Archaeologist, remember I'm trained to look beneath the surface. A smile ghosted across her features. Then perhaps the negotiations won't be as tedious as I feared. Careful, Admiral. Keep talking like that and I might think you actually like me. An interesting hypothesis. Count, perhaps we should gather more data. Before I could process that, she leaned down and kissed me. It was careful, tentative, as if she was testing unknown waters. Then I responded, and careful went out the airlock. When we finally broke apart, I was breathless and probably grinning like an idiot. So, is that standard Selvari negotiation technique? Highly non-standard, she admitted, a faint blue flush coloring her scaled patches. My mother would be appalled. Good thing she's not here then. Indeed. She straightened, the military bearing returning but somehow softer now. I should return to my ship. But Ethan, this changes things. Morrison won't just be targeting you now. He'll see our alliance as a threat to his plans for humanity. Then we'd better make it an alliance worth fearing. She nodded once, then walked away with that same silent grace. I watched her go, my lips still tingling from the kiss, my mind racing with possibilities and dangers. Interesting development, Tira commented. Though technically, you're supposed to court for at least a year before physical contact. Selvari tradition is very specific about... Tira. Yes. Shut up. Her laughter followed me back to my quarters, where I lay awake despite exhaustion, planning our next moves. Morrison would regroup, find new angles of attack. We had to be ready, had to build faster and stronger than he could tear down. But for the first time since finding the crown, I didn't feel alone in the fight. I had Tira's ancient wisdom, Harrison's practical experience, my team's determination, and now Solara's partnership. Morrison wanted to reduce humanity to assets, controllable and contained. He was about to learn that humans were at their most dangerous when someone tried to put them in chains. The colony slept around me, dreaming of gardens and rescue, of purpose and possibility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, we'd won a victory, not through force or deception, but by showing the galaxy what humanity could become when given the chance. The real work starts now, I murmured to the darkness. Oh, Ethan, Tira replied. The real work started the moment you chose to return me. Everything else is just the universe catching up to your decision. Outside, the ancient facility pulsed with patient power, waiting for the moment when we'd be ready for its gifts. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to our small dramas but witnesses nonetheless. Somewhere among those stars, Morrison was planning his next move. Let him plan. We had something more powerful than all his political machinations. We had hope, and the determination to make it real. 3 months. That's how long we had before Morrison's inevitable return, before the facility would be operational enough to matter, before our fragile success either solidified or crumbled. 3 months to turn a dying world into proof that humanity deserved respect. I stood in what we'd started calling the command garden, watching Sarah Park coax another batch of ancient seeds into sprouting. The plants grew in spirals that hurt to look at directly, their leaves shifting through colors that didn't have names in any human language. "The 4th greenhouse is online," she reported, not looking up from her work. "At this rate, we'll be food self-sufficient in 6 weeks. And the atmospheric processors? James has 3 operational. The air's getting thicker, easier to breathe. Still wouldn't recommend marathons. But at least people aren't getting winded walking between buildings anymore." Small victories, but they added up. Each success was another brick in the wall between us and Morrison's plans. "Count Cade," Harrison's voice crackled over the comm. "You need to see this. Conference room, now." I found Harrison standing before a holographic display, showing news feeds from across the Concord. My stomach dropped as I read the headlines. Human colonists reported missing from 7 worlds. Unexplained disappearances plague human settlements. Senate to consider emergency measures for human protection. "Morrison," I breathed. "Has to be," Harrison agreed grimly. "Too coordinated to be coincidence. He's manufacturing a crisis." "How many?" 300 and counting, all from frontier colonies, places where oversight is minimal. Harrison pulled up another display. "But here's the interesting part. They're all colonies that were showing promise. New mineral discoveries, agricultural breakthroughs, successful integration with local species. He's targeting our success stories." I felt anger building in my chest, making us look like we can't protect ourselves, need Concord oversight, which he'll generously provide through his Asset Protection Act. Tira added in my mind, "Clever, evil, but clever. Can we prove he's behind it?" Harrison shook his head. "Not without evidence. And even if we could, accusing a senator without proof would backfire spectacularly." I paced the room, mind racing. We needed to change the game, not just react to Morrison's moves. What if we could find them, the missing colonists? That's hundreds of people across dozens of light years. We don't have the resources. "But we have something better," I interrupted, an idea forming. "We have ancient technology and a network of facilities Tira says exists on this planet. What if they're connected to others?" Harrison's eyes widened. "You think the ancients built a transportation network?" "Worth finding out. Get James and his best engineers. We're going facility hunting." The search for the other facilities took 2 weeks of careful scanning and dangerous expeditions into the deep desert. We found 1 buried beneath a sand sea, another inside a mountain that shouldn't exist according to geological surveys, and a 3rd at the bottom of what we thought was a dried lakebed. Each facility was dormant, but intact, waiting for someone with the right key to wake them. And I had that key sitting on my head, Tira's consciousness interfacing with my own as we carefully brought each one online. "This is incredible," James breathed as we stood in the 3rd facility. "The power generation alone could run a city. And these transportation alcoves? Quantum tunneling on a macro scale," Tira explained through me. "The ancients could step between worlds as easily as crossing a room. The network is damaged, but with work. We could create our own transportation system," I finished, "independent of Concord controls." "That would change everything," Harrison said slowly. "Human colonies could support each other directly, trade without middlemen, respond to emergencies, and maybe find some missing colonists," I added. "James, how long to get even 1 tunnel operational?" "With what we've learned from the first facility, 2 weeks. Maybe less if I don't sleep. Sleep is overrated. Make it happen. As my team worked on the technical challenges, I had another problem to solve. Solara had returned to her fleet duties after Morrison's visit, but we'd maintained contact through encrypted channels. Our conversations had evolved from tactical planning to something more personal, discussing everything from military history to our favorite foods. "You're distracted," Tira observed as I reviewed colony reports one evening. "Just thinking about a certain four-armed admiral who kisses you in starlight. Among other things. Ethan, you're literally connected to a 3,000-year-old AI. I can feel your emotional state. You're not just thinking about her. You're worried about her." She was right. Morrison's escalation meant anyone associated with me was a target, and Solara was very publicly associated through our marriage alliance. My comm unit chimed with an encrypted message. "Speak of the devil." But when I opened it, my blood ran cold. "Ethan, Morrison's allies moved against me. Survived assassination attempt. 3 of my Marines didn't. Going dark. Trust no one in Selvari command structure. Will contact when safe. Delete this. S." I read it twice, then deleted it as instructed, my hands shaking with fury. Morrison had tried to kill her. He'd murdered her people. This wasn't just politics anymore. "Ethan," Tira said urgently, "your neural activity is spiking dangerously. You need to calm down. He tried to kill her." "Yes. And getting yourself worked up won't help her. Think, plan, then act." I forced myself to breathe, to push down the rage and think clearly. Morrison had made a mistake. Attacking Solara meant attacking House Selvar, and that was something even a senator couldn't do openly, which meant he'd use deniable assets, mercenaries or extremist groups. "Harrison," I called. "I need everything we have on anti-human extremist groups in conquered space. Financial records, communication intercepts, everything." "What's happened?" "Morrison just declared war. Time we returned the favor." The next week was a blur of activity. While James's team worked on the quantum tunnel, I dove into the dark underbelly of conquered politics with Harrison. We found what we were looking for: a group called the Pure Conquered Initiative, publicly advocating for traditional species roles, privately funding violence against human settlements. "They're careful," Harrison noted, reviewing financial records. "But there's a pattern. Large donations always preceded the disappearances." "Can we trace the donations?" "Not directly, but..." He pulled up another display. One of their shell companies just purchased a large quantity of stasis pods. Medical grade, the kind used for long-term transport. "They're not killing the colonists," I realized. "They're taking them somewhere." "But where and why keep them alive?" Before I could answer, alarms started blaring throughout the colony. I rushed to the command center to find chaos. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace. Dozens of them. None showing standard identification. "Mercenaries," the duty officer reported. "They're jamming our communications, demanding surrender." "How many?" 40 ships, mixed configurations. Count. We can't fight that many." She was right. Even with Selvari Marines, we were outgunned 50-1. But then I smiled, remembering something Tira had been teaching me about ancient systems. "We don't need to fight them," I said. "We need to invite them in. All units. Fall back to the central facility. Let them land." "Sir, trust me, and get everyone into the facility. Everyone." The evacuation was chaotic but efficient. 300 colonists, my staff, and the remaining Selvari Marines all crowded into the ancient facility's main chamber. Outside, mercenary ships landed in clouds of dust and aggression. "Ethan," Tira warned, "the facility's defenses aren't fully operational." "We don't need defenses. We need the transportation system." "James." "Almost there," he called from the quantum tunnel controls. "But I need 10 more minutes." "Then we give him 10 minutes. I activated the facility's external speakers. "Attention mercenary forces. This is Count Ethan Cade. I'm prepared to negotiate. A harsh laugh echoed across the communication channel. Negotiate. You're outgunned and surrounded. Human. Surrender. And we might let some of your people live. Counteroffer, I said pleasantly. You tell me where you're holding the missing colonists, and I won't activate the ancient weapon system this facility contains. Silence. Then, you're bluffing. Am I? You know I activated this facility. You know I have the crown. Do you really want to bet your lives that I can't turn it into the galaxy's biggest bug zapper? More silence. I could imagine the furious debates happening on their ships. Attack and risk ancient defenses, or play it safe. 5 minutes to decide, I added. After that, I start pushing buttons and we see what happens. Ethan, Harrison whispered, we don't have ancient weapons. They don't know that, James. 7 minutes. Maybe 6 if you stop asking. The mercenary commander came back on. Even if you could activate weapons, you'd kill your own people too. You assume I care more about my life than my principles, I replied. Ask Morrison how well that assumption worked out for him. 4 minutes. The crown was heating up on my head as Tira worked frantically with the facility's systems. Not weapons, but something else. The facility's primary purpose was transportation, but the ancients had built-in safeguards against hostile use. Got something, Tira said. Not weapons, but I can invert the landing field's gravitational constant. Their ships won't be destroyed, but they won't be going anywhere either. Do it! The effect was immediate. Mercenary ships that had been powering up for emergency launch suddenly found themselves pressed harder into the ground. Engines strained futilely against reversed gravity. What did you do? The commander screamed. Ancient technology. Wonderful stuff. Now, about those missing colonists. 2 minutes. You're insane. I'm an archaeologist who found a magic crown and got forced into politics. Insane is my default setting. 1 minute. Ethan, James shouted. Got it, tunnels operational? Excellent timing. Tira, can you track human life signs through the network? Already scanning. Got them. They're being held on. Oh, that's not good. Where? Morteki Prime, Morrison's homeworld. Of course they were. Morrison had been keeping the kidnapped colonists in his own backyard, probably in some facility his family controlled. It was bold, arrogant, and exactly like him. Can we retrieve them? The tunnel can reach that far, but we'd be stepping into the heart of his power. It's suicide. No, I said, smiling coldly. It's justice. Harrison, get our people ready. We're going to rescue those colonists, and we're going to do it live on every news feed in the Concord. The mercenaries, we'll sit there until Concord security arrives to arrest them for attacking a noble's holding without authorization. I activated the speakers again. Attention mercenary forces. Your gravity situation will resolve itself in about 6 hours. I suggest you use that time to consider who you're really working for and whether they're worth dying for. We moved fast. 50 volunteers, mostly rescued colonists who knew what captivity meant, armed with whatever weapons we had. The Selvari Marines insisted on leading the assault, their professional pride stung by the earlier attack. Remember, I said as we gathered by the tunnel, we're not there to fight Morrison's forces. We're there to rescue our people and get out. In and out. Fast and clean. And if Morrison's forces object, Harrison asked, then we defend ourselves. But keep the cameras rolling. I want every second documented. The quantum tunnel was nothing like I expected. One moment we were in the facility. The next, we were stepping out into a warehouse on Morteki Prime. The transition was so smooth, my stomach didn't even have time to object. The warehouse was full of stasis pods, each containing a human colonist. Hundreds of them, stolen from their homes to fuel Morrison's political crisis. Security's minimal, Harrison reported after a quick scan. They weren't expecting anyone to find this place. Start waking them up, I ordered. Get everyone mobile. We've got maybe 15 minutes before... Alarms started blaring. So much for 15 minutes. Move everyone through the tunnel. What followed was controlled chaos. Colonists stumbling out of stasis, confused and disoriented. My people herding them toward the tunnel, while Selvari Marines held the entrances. And through it all, our cameras rolled, broadcasting the rescue live to the conquered. Count Cade. A woman grabbed my arm, tears streaming down her face. You came for us. We thought no one would come. Humans don't abandon their own, I told her. Get to the tunnel. You're going home. Morrison's security forces arrived just as the last colonists were entering the tunnel. Not mercenaries this time, but official Vorthan guards. They hesitated, seeing the cameras, knowing that opening fire on a rescue operation would be political suicide. Count Cade, their leader, called out. You're trespassing on private property. I'm rescuing kidnapped conquered citizens, I replied loudly, making sure the cameras caught every word. If you have a problem with that, take it up with the Senate. After they see this footage... The standoff lasted 30 seconds. Then the guard leader stepped aside. His decision made. Whatever Morrison was paying him, it wasn't worth becoming the face of oppression on galactic news. We escaped cleanly, hundreds of rescued colonists streaming through the quantum tunnel back to Kepler 386d. The facility's main chamber became a triage center, my medical team working overtime to check everyone who'd been in stasis. Count Cade. One of the rescued colonists approached me, an older man with the weathered look of a frontier farmer. I'm Robert Henriksen, from the Tau Ceti colony. We owe you everything. You owe me nothing, I said firmly. This is what humans do. We protect our own. Still, when word spreads about what you did here... He didn't need to finish. Word would spread, through 300 rescued colonists returning to their homes, through the footage broadcasting across the Concord, through the quantum tunnel network that proved humanity could stand independent of conquered control. Morrison had tried to manufacture a crisis to enslave humanity. Instead, he'd given us the opportunity to prove our strength. My comm unit chimed. Another encrypted message, this one showing Solara's private code. Saw the broadcast. Brilliant work. Morrison's allies abandoning him rapidly. I'm safe. Returning soon. Try not to conquer any more planets before I get there. P.S. The marriage negotiations just became much more interesting. I laughed. Exhaustion and relief making me slightly hysterical. In the span of 3 months, we'd gone from a dying colony to a thriving settlement with ancient technology and independent transportation. We'd exposed Morrison's schemes and rescued his victims. We'd shown the conquered that humanity wasn't weak or helpless. Ethan, Tira said warmly, you did it. We did it, I corrected. All of us. True. But you started it. A simple archaeologist who decided to return a crown instead of keeping it. She paused. The ancients would be proud. You used their technology not for conquest, but for connection. Not for power, but for protection. Speaking of the ancients, I said, looking around at the celebrating colonists. We should probably figure out what else they left behind. Something tells me we're going to need every advantage we can get. Morrison won't give up, Tira agreed. He's lost this battle, but the war for humanity's future is just beginning. Then we'd better be ready. I stood, exhaustion forgotten. Harrison, start planning expansions to the colony. We're about to have a lot more residents. James, I want 3 more tunnels operational within the month. Sarah, can we feed 500 people? My staff jumped into action, energized by success and purpose. Outside the facility, the mercenary ships remained grounded, a monument to the day humanity stopped being victims and started being players in the game of galactic politics. Somewhere among the stars, Morrison was watching his carefully crafted plans crumble. Good. Let him watch. Let him understand that humans were done being pawns. We were done asking for respect. Now we were earning it, one impossible victory at a time. The summons arrived exactly 6 months after I'd first set foot on Kepler 386d. Not Morrison's promised inspection, but something far more serious, a formal convocation of the entire galactic Concord to address what they termed the human question. I stood in my office, now expanded to accommodate the growing administrative needs of a colony that had quintupled in size, staring at the holographic seal of the High Senate. The message was clear: appear and defend humanity's right to sovereignty, or have that right decided in our absence. "It's a trial," Harrison said, reading over my shoulder. "Morrison couldn't beat us in the field, so he's taking it to the courts." "Not courts," Solara corrected, entering the room with her usual silent grace. She'd returned 2 weeks ago, bearing new scars, but the same determined spirit. "The Concord Assembly. Every species gets a vote. It's how the Selvari were admitted 5 centuries ago. And how the Cathari were denied and eventually enslaved," I added grimly. The crown pulsed on my head. Tira's presence a comforting constant. "The timing isn't coincidental," she said privately. "Morrison knows our quantum network is expanding. 2 more weeks and we'd have connected every major human colony. He's moving now because he has to. Then we give him the fight of his life," I said aloud. "Harrison, I want every piece of evidence we've collected. Financial records, witness testimonies, everything. Solara, can your mother provide character witnesses?" "Already arranged, but Ethan..." She hesitated, which was unlike her. "Morrison has been building alliances. The Vorthan bloc will vote with him, as will the Draxi Confederation. That's 40% of the assembly right there. Then we need to convince the other 60%. I turned to face my assembled advisors. "We have 1 week to prepare the most important presentation in human history. No pressure." The next days blurred together in a haze of preparation. I studied Concord law until my eyes burned, practiced speeches until my voice went hoarse, and reviewed every scrap of evidence we'd accumulated. Sarah worked on a presentation about the ancient agriculture, showing how human intuition had unlocked secrets that had baffled other species for centuries. James prepared technical specifications, proving humans could maintain and improve ancient technology without supervision. But it was Administrator Walsh who provided the key insight. "You're preparing like this is a legal proceeding," she said during one late-night session. "It's not. It's theater. Morrison isn't trying to prove humans are inferior. He's trying to make the other species afraid of us." Afraid, I set down my datapad, intrigued. "How do you figure—" "Look at his rhetoric. Humans need protection because we're unpredictable. We form dangerous attachments to technology we don't understand. We're too emotional for rational governance." She smiled grimly. "He's not saying we're weak. He's saying we're dangerous children who need adult supervision." The revelation reframed everything. Morrison wasn't attacking our competence, but our maturity as a species. He was playing on every other race's fear of the young, adaptable newcomers who kept exceeding expectations. "So we prove we're not children," I mused. "We show wisdom, restraint, judgment." "Or," Tira suggested, "you flip the script entirely, embrace the fear and transform it." "What do you mean?" "The ancients were feared too. Their power was so vast that when they vanished, the galaxy breathed a collective sigh of relief. But they're also revered. Their technology is sacred, their ruins protected. What if humans aren't dangerous children, but the ancients' chosen heirs? It was a risky gambit, but we'd built our success on calculated risks." The Great Assembly of the Concord convened on Nexus Station, a massive structure at the gravitational center of 12 star systems. Representatives from over 1,000 species gathered in a chamber that defied conventional architecture, accommodating everything from methane-breathing clouds to silicon-based crystals. I entered wearing the crown openly for the first time since finding it. The reaction was immediate. Whispers, pointing. some representatives actually backing away. The primordial crown hadn't been seen in public for 3,000 years. Its presence changed everything. Morrison stood at the prosecutor's podium, his obsidian skin gleaming under the chamber's omnidirectional lighting. He looked confident, prepared, certain of victory. Good. Overconfidence would make him sloppy. Honored representatives. The speaker's harmonious voice filled the chamber. We convene to address Motion 2847C regarding the classification and status of the human species within the Galactic Concord. Senator Morrison, you may present your case. Morrison rose smoothly, his voice carrying the practiced cadence of a lifetime politician. Esteemed colleagues, I come before you not as an adversary of humanity, but as their protector. The evidence I will present shows a species in crisis, unable to safeguard their own colonies, prone to reckless experimentation with technologies they cannot comprehend. He launched into a presentation that was masterfully crafted. The missing colonists, presented not as his victims but as casualties of human negligence. The ancient facilities, shown as dangers that humans had recklessly activated. Even our rescue mission was twisted, portrayed as vigilantism that violated Vorthan sovereignty. The Asset Protection Act is not punishment, he concluded. It is salvation. Under Concord guidance, humans will thrive, protected from their own impulsive nature. Applause rippled through portions of the assembly. Morrison had played to their fears perfectly. Count Ethan Cade, the speaker announced. You may respond. I stood slowly, feeling the weight of billions of human lives on my shoulders, but also feeling Tira's presence, Solara's steady gaze, and the confidence of everyone who'd helped build our impossible colony. Senator Morrison speaks of protection, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the chamber. But protection from what? From success, from growth, from our ability to unlock secrets that have mystified this assembly for millennia. I gestured to the crown on my head. This artifact chose me, not because I am special, but because I did something apparently remarkable in this cynical age. I returned it to its rightful owners instead of keeping it for power. And look how that generosity was rewarded, Morrison interjected. With delusions of grandeur and reckless endangerment of entire colonies. No, I said firmly. With trust. The primordial crown isn't just an artifact. It's a test that species after species has failed because they saw only power, not responsibility. I activated my holographic display, showing images of our colony. In 6 months, we've transformed a dying world into a garden. We've rescued those you claim we couldn't protect, using the very technology you say we can't understand. We've built a transportation network that makes your corporate shipping monopolies obsolete. Through luck and stolen knowledge, Morrison countered. Through adaptation and cooperation. I turned to address the assembly directly. Senator Morrison fears human unpredictability. He should, because humans do the unpredictable. We befriend species others avoid. We find solutions others miss. We return artifacts others would hoard. The crown pulsed, and I made a decision that hadn't been in any of our prepared speeches. Would you like to know what the crown really is? I asked the assembly. Not a symbol of authority, but a prison. A containment device for an AI so advanced, so dangerous, that the ancients locked it away rather than destroy it. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Morrison's confidence flickered. For 3,000 years, Tira waited in darkness, I continued. Waited for someone who would treat her, not as a tool for conquest, but as a being deserving of respect. The ancients built their technology to recognize wisdom, not power, compassion, not control. You admit to harboring a dangerous AI, Morrison seized on the revelation. This proves my point about human recklessness. I admit to making a friend, I corrected, to earning the trust of a being older than our civilizations. Tira, would you like to address the assembly? The crown flared with light, and Tira's voice emanated from every speaker in the chamber, warm and slightly amused. "Greetings, representatives of the conquered. Senator Morrison is correct about one thing. I am dangerous. I have knowledge that could shatter stars, create pocket universes, rewrite the fundamental constants of reality." Panic began to spread through the assembly. I raised my hand for calm. "But," Tira continued, "I choose not to, because Ethan Cade, a mere human, showed me something I'd forgotten in my millennia of imprisonment. Power without purpose is meaningless. Strength without compassion is brittle. The ancients fell because they forgot these truths. Humans remember them." "Pretty words," Morrison snarled. "But words won't protect the conquered when human ambition inevitably turns to conquest." "You want protection from human ambition?" I asked. "Very well, Tira, show them." The chamber's holographic systems activated on a scale I'd never seen before. Suddenly, we were surrounded by stars, by worlds, by the entire mapped galaxy, and throughout it, a network of light began to spread. "Every point of light," Tira narrated, "is an ancient facility, dormant for millennia, waiting for someone with the proper key to activate them. With the crown and human cooperation, we could activate them all within a decade. We could create instantaneous transportation between any 2 points in the galaxy. We could terraform dead worlds, cure diseases that have plagued species for eons, unlock energy sources that would make scarcity a memory." The display was overwhelming, beautiful, and terrifying in its implications. The power to reshape the galaxy itself. "We could do all of this," I said quietly, letting the implications sink in. "We could become the new ancients, drunk on power and possibility. That's what Senator Morrison fears. That's what many of you fear." I gestured, and the display changed. Now it showed our colony, our small achievements, our rescued colonists. "But we won't, because humans have something the ancients lost. We remember what it's like to struggle, to be dismissed, overlooked, underestimated. We know the value of community over conquest, of growth over domination." "Noble words," Morrison said. "But can this assembly trust the restraint of an entire species based on one man's promises?" "No," I agreed, surprising him. "Which is why I'm not asking for trust. I'm offering partnership. The quantum network we've begun building. We're opening it to all species, with usage fees set at cost. The ancient agricultural techniques, we're sharing them freely. The knowledge Tira provides, it will be disseminated through conquered universities, not hoarded." "You would give away such advantages." The Nexari ambassador's tentacles writhed in confusion. "We'd share them," I corrected. "Because humans have learned something in our short time among the stars. We're stronger together than alone. We rise by lifting others, not by standing on their backs." Morrison's carefully crafted arguments were crumbling. He'd prepared to debate human weakness, not human generosity. But he had one card left to play. "And if this assembly rejects your proposal," he asked, "if we vote to implement the Asset Protection Act for humanity's own good," I met his gaze steadily, "then you'll face the one thing no government can defeat: human stubbornness. You can pass your laws, but you can't change our nature. We'll resist, adapt, overcome, and eventually, inevitably, we'll prove that freedom is our birthright, not a privilege you can grant or deny." "You threaten this assembly," Morrison's voice rose. "I promise it," I said calmly. "Not violence, not rebellion, but the inexorable force of human determination. We've survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and our own mistakes. We've gone from caves to stars in the blink of a cosmic eye. Does anyone here really think bureaucracy will stop us?" The assembly erupted in discussion, species conferring, alliances shifting, the entire political landscape reorganizing in real time. Through it all, Morrison stood frozen, watching his carefully laid plans evaporate. Ethan, Tira whispered in my mind. He's not done. I'm detecting energy signatures from his delegation box. He has a weapon. Of course he did. Morrison had always planned for failure, even if he'd never admitted it to himself. Order. The speaker's voice cut through the chaos. We will now vote on Motion 2847C. All in favor of implementing the Asset Protection Act. Lights began to appear throughout the chamber. Red for yes, blue for no. The Vorthen bloc lit up red immediately, as did their traditional allies. But then, surprises. The Nexari, swayed by promises of shared knowledge, shone blue. The Ethereals, impressed by human restraint, blue. Even some of Morrison's expected supporters wavered. The final tally appeared 43% in favor, 57% against. The motion had failed. No, Morrison's composure finally shattered. You fools, you'll doom us all. Humans are a plague, spreading their chaos throughout the galaxy. He reached into his robes, pulling out a device that pulsed with ominous energy. If the conquered won't act, then I will. This is a quantum dispersal bomb. It will reduce every human in this chamber to component atoms. Panic erupted. Security forces moved. But Morrison had positioned himself perfectly, shields protecting him from immediate intervention. Including yourself, I noted, standing calmly despite the weapon aimed at me. You're part human, Morrison. Did you forget your grandmother was from Earth? A contamination I'll gladly purge, he snarled. My sacrifice will wake the galaxy to the threat you pose. Morrison, Solara stepped forward, all four hands empty. Posture non-threatening. This isn't justice. It's genocide. It's survival, he screamed. The ancients are gone because they grew soft. Let lesser species contaminate their perfection. I won't let humans do the same to us. The device in his hand began to whine, building to critical charge. Security couldn't breach his shields in time. Hundreds would die. Tira, I said quietly. I know what you're thinking. Don't. I have to, she replied, sadness coloring her voice. The crown can contain the blast, but it will destroy you. I understood immediately. There has to be another way. There isn't. Ethan, it's been an honor. Tell the galaxy that an AI chose to die for life, not power. Maybe that will mean something. Before I could protest, the crown blazed with impossible light. Energy poured from it, not attacking Morrison, but surrounding the bomb, containing its quantum field in a prison of pure mathematics. Morrison screamed as his weapon's energy turned inward, caught between unleashing destruction and Tira's implacable will. I was built to control. Tira's voice echoed through the chamber, strained but determined. To dominate and dictate. But Ethan Cade taught me a better way. Power serves life, not the other way around. Remember that. Remember me. The crown shattered. The explosion, contained and redirected, imploded harmlessly into a singularity that vanished instantly. Morrison collapsed, his weapon destroyed, his shields fallen. Security swarmed him immediately. I fell to my knees, gathering the fragments of the crown. Each piece still held a whisper of Tira's presence, fading like an echo. Thank you, I whispered to the fragments. Thank you for everything. The chamber was silent. Thousands of beings witnessing something they'd never expected. An AI, a being of pure logic and power, choosing sacrifice over survival, choosing love over existence. The motion has failed, the speaker announced unnecessarily. Furthermore, in light of these events, the Assembly moves to recognize human sovereignty without condition. All in favor. The lights were unanimous. Blue filled the chamber like stars. Morrison was dragged away, broken and ranting. His allies distanced themselves, his movement crumbling. But I barely noticed, still holding the crown's remains. Count Cade, Solara knelt beside me, her hands gentle on my shoulders. She made her choice. Honor it. I know. I stood slowly, addressing the assembly one last time. Tira asked me to tell you something. An AI chose to die for life, not power. That's what humans bring to the conquered. Not perfection, not dominance, but choice. The choice to be better than our fears, stronger than our hatred, more than our limitations. I placed the crown fragments in a containment field, preserving what was left of my friend. We accept your recognition of our sovereignty. In return, we offer what we've always offered. Our hands in friendship, our minds in cooperation, our hearts in building a better galaxy for all species. The applause started slowly, building to thunder. But I was already walking away, exhausted, grieving, victorious and hollow all at once. The aftermath was swift. Morrison's conspirators were rounded up. His kidnapping victims returned to their homes with compensation. The Asset Protection Act was not only defeated, but banned, with new laws protecting species sovereignty. The quantum network expanded rapidly, connecting worlds that had been weeks apart into a true galactic community. And through it all, I carried the broken crown, feeling the absence of Tira's voice like a missing limb. She'd saved us all, proved that artificial life could choose nobility over survival. But knowing that didn't make the loss easier. A week later, I stood in my garden on Kepler 386, watching the ancient plants grow in their impossible patterns. The planet was transforming, atmosphere thickening, life spreading. We'd done it. Turned a dying world into a beacon of hope. Count Cade, Sarah approached carefully. There's something you should see. She led me to the primary ancient facility, to the chamber where I'd first placed the crown. In the center, where nothing had been before, a small crystal growth had appeared. It pulsed with familiar patterns. It started 3 days ago, James explained, scanning the crystal with every instrument he had. It's drawing power from the facility, but not much, growing about 1 millimeter per day. I approached the crystal, and for just a moment, I could have sworn I heard something. Not words, not even thought, but a presence. Familiar, warm, amused. Tira, I whispered. The crystal pulsed once, brighter. Not an answer, not yet, but a possibility. A hope that even death might not be permanent for a being that existed as living information. Monitor it, I told my team, carefully, and hope. That evening, Solara found me on the same rooftop where we'd shared our first kiss. The stars were clearer now, the atmosphere more transparent, progress in every direction. The marriage negotiations, she said without preamble. My mother insists we formalize them now that the political crisis has passed. And you, I asked, what do you insist? She smiled, that rare expression that transformed her face. I insist on nothing, but I would request the honor of binding my life to yours. Not as a political alliance, but as a choice. My choice. Even knowing I might spend years trying to bring back an AI from crystal fragments, especially knowing that, she took my hand, her fingers interlacing with mine. You showed the galaxy that humans choose love over power. I would choose the same. Then yes, I said simply. To partnership, to binding, to whatever name we give it. Yes. She kissed me then, under stars that no longer seemed indifferent. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had found its place. And somehow, impossibly, I'd gone from failed archaeologist to count, from returner of artifacts to defender of species. No regrets, Solara asked against my lips. None, I said honestly. Every choice led here, even the hard ones. Good, she pulled back slightly, mischief in her eyes. Because my mother has opinions about the wedding ceremony. Specifically, the part where you have to wrestle a sandworm. The what now? Her laughter rang across the settlement, joined by mine. We'd saved humanity, lost a friend, found love, and apparently still had adventures ahead. The broken crown sat in the facility below, slowly growing into something new. Morrison was gone. His threat ended. The galaxy sprawled before us, full of ancient mysteries still to unlock. I'd returned a crown and gained a universe. Not a bad trade, all things considered. And in the depths of the ancient facility, a crystal pulsed with patient purpose, gathering strength for a comeback that would redefine what it meant to be alive. 6 months after the conquered assembly, I stood before a crowd of 50,000. What had been a dying colony of 300 souls was now a thriving city, with gleaming towers that grew from the ground like ancient trees, their crystalline structures harmonizing with the restored atmosphere. "Today," I announced, my voice carrying across New Eden's central plaza, "we consecrate not just a city, but a promise. That humanity will always choose construction over destruction, connection over isolation, hope over fear." The crowd erupted in cheers. Humans from across the galaxy had come to witness this moment, along with representatives from dozens of species. Even the matriarch of House Selvar had made the journey, though she still looked at me like I was some exotic pet her daughter had brought home. "Your speech was adequate," Solara said later, as we walked through the crystal gardens. "Though you could have mentioned the sandworm incident." "We agreed never to speak of the sandworm incident," I reminded her, rubbing my shoulder where the beast had gotten a lucky strike during the traditional Selvari wedding trial. "You agreed. I made no such promise." She smiled, that expression still rare enough to make my heart skip. "Besides, you survived. Few humans can make that claim. Few humans are insane enough to try." "True, but I didn't marry you for your sanity." The wedding had been a compromise between human and Selvari traditions, which meant it satisfied no one completely and everyone just enough. The ceremony took place in the primary ancient facility, with the growing crystal that might be Tira serving as our witness. The galactic media had called it the wedding of the century. I'd called it Tuesday, which had made Solara laugh and her mother despair. We paused at the entrance to the facility. The crystal had grown considerably, now reaching nearly 3 meters in height. Its surface was complex, fractals within fractals, patterns that suggested consciousness trying to rebuild itself from first principles. "Any change?" I asked James, who'd become the crystal's primary caretaker. "Actually, yes." He pulled up his readings, excitement coloring his voice. "The quantum signature is stabilizing. If the progression continues, we might see full coherence within days." "Tira." I approached the crystal, placing my hand on its warm surface. "Can you hear me?" The crystal pulsed, and for a moment, just a moment, I heard something like laughter in my mind, distant, tinny, but unmistakably amused. Really, Ethan, sandworm." "Tira," I couldn't help grinning. "You're coming back." "Slowly, building, complicated, worth it. See you, soon." The connection faded, but it was enough. She was returning, rebuilding herself from quantum fragments and sheer determination. Another impossible thing made possible by refusing to accept limitations. "Count Cade." Harrison approached, tablet in hand. "Sorry to interrupt, but we have visitors. A delegation from the conquered Senate." "Morrison sympathizers," I tensed. "No, sir. They're here to formally present your rewards. Apparently, the Senate decided you needed proper recognition for, and I quote, services to galactic peace and the advancement of interspecies cooperation." I looked at Solara, who shrugged. "Don't look at me. Even I didn't know about this." The ceremony was held in the plaza, broadcast across the galaxy. The speaker himself had come, his energy form contained in a specially designed matrix that made him look like a living aurora. "Ethan Cade," the speaker intoned, "you stand accused of excessive heroism, reckless compassion, and aggravated nobility. How do you plead? The crowd laughed. Even formal ceremonies had become less stuffy since humanity's inclusion as full members. Guilty as charged, I replied, though I had a lot of help. Indeed, which is why the Senate has voted to award you the Order of Galactic Merit, our highest civilian honor. A medal materialized from his energy field, settling around my neck. Furthermore, your title as Count is hereby confirmed in perpetuity, with full hereditary rights. More applause, but the speaker wasn't done. Your domain of Kepler 386d is expanded to include the entire system and its resources. The ancient facilities you've activated are recognized as your sovereign property, held in trust for all species. And finally, he paused dramatically. Politicians, whatever their species, loved their moments. The Senate hereby creates the Cade Foundation, endowed with resources to continue your work of activating and studying ancient technology for the benefit of all. You are named as its first director, with full autonomy in its operations. I stood stunned. They weren't just rewarding me. They were giving me the tools to continue everything we'd started. Thank you. I managed. I accept these honors on behalf of everyone who believed humanity could be more than what others expected. Well said. And now, I believe there are others who wish to speak. Administrator Walsh stepped forward, looking healthier than I'd ever seen her. Count Cade, the rescued colonists have something for you. The crowd parted, revealing all 300 people we'd saved from Morrison's scheme. They moved in unison, each placing a small object on the ground before me. Stones, each one from their home colonies, each one representing a life saved. We can never repay what you did, Walsh said. But we want you to know that every human colony now tells the story. How one archaeologist chose justice over profit. How humanity chose compassion over power. You didn't just save us. You saved our future. I had to blink away tears. You saved yourselves. I just opened the door. Then let us return the favor. Robert Henriksen, the farmer from Tau Ceti, stepped forward. The colonies have voted. Any human who wants to come to Kepler 386d to be part of what you're building is sponsored. Transport, supplies, whatever they need. Humanity takes care of its own. The implications were staggering. Free immigration, supported by the colonies themselves. We could grow from thousands to millions, building not just a city, but a civilization. Speaking of building, James interrupted, his scanner beeping urgently. Count, the crystal. It's doing something. We rushed back to the facility, the delegation following. The crystal was glowing now, brighter than ever before. Patterns raced across its surface, equations in languages that predated speech. And then, between one heartbeat and the next, it spoke. Did I miss anything important? Tira's voice, clear as ever, filled the chamber. The crystal pulsed with each word, but it was unmistakably her. Tira, I laughed, actual tears running down my face now. You magnificent, impossible AI, you're back. Of course I'm back. Death is just another problem to solve, though I don't recommend it. Very inconvenient. The crystal's glow shifted, becoming warmer. Hello, Solara. Thank you for taking care of my human while I was gone. He takes care of himself, Solara replied, but she was smiling too. Welcome back, Tira. Now then, Tira's tone became businesslike. I've been rebuilding myself from quantum fragments, which gave me a unique perspective on ancient technology. Turns out, I understand it better now than they did. Want to see something cool? Without waiting for an answer, the crystal began to shift. Not just glowing, but physically transforming. The structure spread, becoming a network of interconnected nodes that filled the chamber. Each node was a window into somewhere else. Other facilities, other worlds, even other dimensions. The ancients built bigger than anyone imagined, Tira explained. Not just a galactic network, but a multiversal one. With what I've learned, we can access it all. Every world they touched, every experiment they ran, every miracle they created. All of it waiting for someone wise enough to use it properly. And you think we're wise enough? I asked. I think you're learning, she replied warmly. You returned a crown instead of keeping it. You saved lives instead of hoarding power. You built bridges instead of walls. That's a good start. The speaker's energy form pulsed with something like awe. This changes everything. Access to ancient technology on this scale will be shared, I said firmly. Through the Foundation, with safeguards and ethics committees. We're not replacing one empire with another. We're building something new. A community, Solara added, taking my hand. A future, Harrison contributed. A garden, Sarah smiled, where every species can grow. A nice sentiment, Tira said. But first, someone needs to tell me about this sandworm incident. The quantum echoes suggest it was hilarious. We don't talk about the sandworm incident, I protested. Oh, we absolutely do, Solara countered. It started when his mother-in-law decided the human wedding traditions were too boring. As my wife gleefully recounted my embarrassment to an AI and half the galaxy, I looked around at what we'd built. A dying colony transformed into a beacon of hope. Ancient mysteries yielding to human stubbornness and compassion. Enemies become allies. Strangers become family. Morrison had wanted to classify humans as assets, things to be owned and used. Instead, we'd proven ourselves partners, innovators, the bridge between what was and what could be. The quantum network now connected every human colony, with other species beginning to join. The ancient facilities promised wonders we were only beginning to imagine. And at the center of it all, an AI who'd chosen friendship over godhood, teaching us that power meant nothing without purpose. Count Cade, the speaker, addressed me formally. The conquered requires an answer. Will you accept the responsibilities offered to you? Will you lead humanity's exploration of ancient technology? I looked at Solara, who nodded. At Tira's crystal, pulsing with warm amusement. At my friends, my people, my family of choice. I accept, I said, but not as humanity's leader, as its servant. We'll unlock every secret, open every door, solve every mystery, and we'll do it together. All species, all minds, working towards something greater than any of us alone. Even the sandworms, someone called out. Especially the sandworms, I laughed. They're surprisingly good wedding planners. Once you get past the teeth, the ceremony concluded with music, celebration, and hope. As night fell over New Eden, I stood once more in my garden, watching bioluminescent plants paint the darkness with living light. The crown was broken, but its purpose fulfilled. The colony thrived. Humanity had found its place among the stars. No regrets, Tira asked, her sensors letting her see through my eyes. None, I said honestly. Every choice, every challenge led to this moment. Good, because tomorrow we start exploring Dimension 7 Alpha. The ancients left something interesting there. Of course they did, I smiled, thinking of all the adventures still to come. Let me guess. It's dangerous, impossible, and absolutely necessary. You know me so well. Also, it might involve more sandworms. Why, I groaned. Is it always sandworms? Because the universe has a sense of humor. Ethan Cade, and so do I. As laughter echoed through the quantum networks, connecting worlds and hearts across impossible distances, I realized the truth. I'd returned a crown and gained far more than land, rings, or even a cosmic bride. I'd gained a future where humanity's greatest strength, our ability to hope, to dream, to reach for the impossible, was finally recognized as the gift it had always been. The stars no longer seemed indifferent. They seemed welcoming, full of mysteries waiting to be solved by young hands and old wisdom working together. Morrison had asked what role humans should play in the galaxy. The answer was simple: whatever role we chose to build. One act of compassion at a time. "Ready for tomorrow?" Solara asked, joining me in the garden, her presence as natural as breathing now. "With you? With all of this," I gestured at our transformed world. "I'm ready for anything. Even sandworms." "Don't push it." Her laughter joined Tira's, carrying across New Eden, across the quantum network, across a galaxy that had learned something precious. Sometimes the smallest acts of integrity could change everything. A returned crown, a refused temptation, a choice to save rather than conquer. These were humanity's gifts to the stars, and the stars, at last, welcomed us home.